The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows of St. Andrew's Church, painting the white casket in fragments of blue and gold. Christopher Brown stood alone beside it, his trembling fingers adjusting the small blue dinosaur resting atop the polished surface. The toy, a velociraptor. Billy had always insisted on correcting anyone who called it just a dinosaur, looked out of place against the formal arrangement of white roses and lilies. He would have hated all these flowers. Christopher whispered, his voice rough from hours of silence. Billy had been allergic to lilies, something his wife should have remembered if she had bothered to help with the arrangements. His phone vibrated in his pocket. The screen lit up with her message. "Sorry, I can't make it to the service. Important business meeting in Brookfield. Give Billy a kiss from me. Love you both." Christopher's fingers tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned white. Brookfield. Another lie to add to her growing collection. He had seen the airline confirmation email in their shared account. She was in Clearwater, probably watching the sunrise from some luxury resort's balcony, while their son lay cold in his casket. "Mr. Brown," the funeral director's soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "We should begin seating the family soon." Christopher nodded, unable to trust his voice. People had started arriving. Billy's teachers from kindergarten, neighbors who had watched him chase butterflies in their front yard just last month, distant relatives who had flown in despite the short notice. They filed in quietly, their faces wearing identical masks of grief and sympathy. His mother appeared at his elbow, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "The flowers are beautiful, Christopher." Billy was allergic to lilies, he said flatly. She touched his arm. "Where is she?" "Business meeting in Brookfield." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. His mother's face hardened. "She should be here. Her son." She broke off, pressing her lips together. "I know, Mom." Christopher stared at the casket. "Believe me, I know." More people arrived. Billy's best friend from kindergarten came with his parents, the little boy clutching a hand-drawn picture of two stick figures playing with dinosaurs. Christopher accepted it with murmured thanks, his heart clenching at the wobbly letters spelling out "best friends forever." His phone buzzed again. "The meeting's running long. I'll call as soon as I can. Stay strong." Strong. Like she had been strong through Billy's illness, through the endless nights in the hospital when their son had cried for his mommy, not understanding why she wasn't there, through the final days when. Christopher pushed the memory away. Not now, not here. The priest approached, prayer book in hand. "Shall we begin?" The service passed in a blur of hymns and prayers. Christopher stood when required, sat when prompted, his responses automatic. His focus kept drifting to the empty space beside him, where she should have been, to the phone in his pocket that occasionally buzzed with her lies. "In times of deepest sorrow," the priest was saying, "we find comfort in knowing that Billy is now in God's embrace." Christopher's mind wandered to Billy's last coherent day in the hospital. His son had asked for her again. He made another excuse again. "Mommy's working hard, buddy. She'll come see you soon." The lie had felt like ground glass in his throat. His sister-in-law read a poem about angels. His brother James spoke about Billy's infectious laugh and dinosaur obsession. Christopher sat through it all, his face a mask of grief that hid the inferno building inside him. At the graveside, they handed him a white rose to place on the casket. The small crowd watched in respectful silence as he stepped forward. Instead of the rose, he placed Billy's favorite book, the Big Book of Dinosaurs, next to the blue velociraptor. "Sweet dreams, buddy," he whispered. "Daddy loves you." His phone vibrated one final time. "Thinking of you both. Meeting running long. Call me later." Christopher looked at the growing mound of earth that would soon cover his son. Billy had been his reason for silence, for swallowing the bitter pills of her betrayal month after month, for maintaining the facade of a happy family, even as he gathered evidence, documented her lies, and quietly prepared for the day he would tear her carefully constructed world apart. Now, standing in the cemetery while she lounged on a beach thousands of miles away, he felt the last threads of mercy snap inside him. She thought she was building a new life. Fine. But first, he would destroy everything she thought she was keeping. The gathering began to disperse. His mother tried to convince him to join her for lunch, but he declined. He had work to do. "Goodbye, Billy," he said softly, placing his untouched white rose on the grave. "I promise you she's going to regret not being here today." He walked away from the grave, each step taking him further from the man he'd been and closer to the man her betrayal had created. His wife thought she was safe in her paradise with her lover. She was about to discover that paradise could become hell with just a few clicks of a button. The time for grief would come later. Now was the time for revenge. 3 months earlier, the first crack in his wife's facade appeared on a Tuesday evening in March. Christopher sat at the kitchen table, helping Billy with his dinosaur puzzle, while a pot of mac and cheese, the only thing their picky 5-year-old would eat lately, bubbled on the stove. "Daddy, this piece doesn't fit." Billy frowned, holding up a puzzle piece with tiny T-Rex claws. "Try turning it around, buddy." Christopher glanced at his watch. 7:45 p.m. She was late. Again. Footsteps on the stairs announced his wife's arrival. She swept into the kitchen in a black dress he'd never seen before, designer briefcase in hand. The scent of unfamiliar perfume drifted in her wake. "Working late again?" Christopher asked, stirring the mac and cheese. "The Anderson merger is killing me," she replied, checking her reflection in the microwave door. "Fitzgerald needs these reports by morning." That's the third time this week. He kept his voice neutral, even as his mind catalogued the inconsistencies. The new dress, the perfume, the freshly styled hair that somehow hadn't suffered from a full day at the office. What's that supposed to mean? Her tone carried a warning edge. Nothing. Just an observation. He turned off the stove. "Billy, dinner's ready. Can we watch Jurassic Park while we eat?" Billy looked up with those big brown eyes. Her eyes. "Not tonight, champ. But how about we read your new dinosaur book after dinner?" "I won't be joining you," his wife announced, already heading for the door. "Don't wait up." "Monty." Billy's lower lip trembled. "When will you be home?" She paused long enough to kiss his forehead. "Late, sweetie. But I'll check on you when I get back." The door closed behind her. Christopher counted to 10, then pulled out his phone and opened their banking app. There was a charge from Sephora earlier that day, $200 for makeup and perfume she'd supposedly worn to the office. That night, after tucking Billy in with 3 bedtime stories and 2 glasses of water, Christopher sat in his home office and began to dig. Credit card statements revealed a pattern he'd been blind to for months. Expensive restaurant charges for 2 on nights she claimed to be working, hotel bar tabs in the city, a lingerie store purchase from last month. He certainly hadn't seen anything new. His cursor hovered over their phone carrier's website. 1 click, and he could view her detailed call logs. Did he really want to know? Yes, he needed to know. The next morning, he called in sick after dropping Billy at school. Her iPad sat forgotten on the kitchen counter. She'd been in such a rush to make her early meeting. His fingers trembled as he entered Billy's birthday. The password she used for everything. The screen unlocked. Messages appeared, hundreds of them, archived in a folder labeled Work Project. His stomach churned as he scrolled through conversations and photos that made him want to vomit. The timestamps matched her late meetings perfectly, too. The text from last night caught his eye. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for next week. Brookfield conference will be perfect. No interruptions." Christopher's vision blurred. Brookfield conference, the same week as her supposed business meeting in Hawaii, that he methodically took screenshots of everything, sending them to his secure email before carefully erasing all traces of his investigation. Then he went to the bathroom and threw up until nothing remained but bitter bile. That evening, he watched Billy chase fireflies in the backyard, his son's laughter a counterpoint to the rage burning in Christopher's chest. For Billy's sake, he would say nothing, do nothing. His son deserved a stable home, even if it was built on lies. "Daddy, look, I caught one." Billy held up his cupped hands, the firefly's glow pulsing between his fingers. Christopher forced a smile. "That's amazing, buddy. You're getting really good at that. Can we show Mommy when she gets home? The firefly might be sleeping by then, but how about we take a picture to show her tomorrow?" Billy nodded eagerly, and Christopher snapped a photo of his son's radiant face, illuminated by the tiny light in his hands, a moment of pure joy preserved forever. The next weeks became an exercise in controlled fury. He watched her leave for meetings, wearing clothes he knew she'd bought for another man. He listened to her phone conversations, now able to decode the real meaning behind her careful words. He documented everything. The breaking point came during Billy's kindergarten play. He'd been cast as a baby dinosaur in the school's spring production. Christopher sat in the audience alone, recording the performance on his phone, while his wife sent a text about being stuck in traffic. Later, he found a restaurant charge from that evening. Dinner for two at an intimate French bistro across town. That night, after Billy was asleep, Christopher began to plan. He spoke with financial advisors under the guise of estate planning. He consulted lawyers about hypothetical scenarios. He gathered evidence, moved assets, and prepared for every contingency, all while maintaining the perfect facade of a loving husband. He kissed her goodbye in the mornings, remembering the taste of lies on her lips. He asked about her day, knowing every answer was false. He played his role flawlessly, all for Billy's sake, until the diagnosis changed everything. The hospital corridor seemed endless, the antiseptic smell burning Christopher's nostrils as he paced outside Billy's room. His phone displayed the same message he'd sent an hour ago. "They want to do more tests. He's asking for you." No response. He knew why. She was at a hotel downtown with him. The knowledge sat like acid in his stomach. "Mr. Brown," the oncologist appeared, clutching a folder. "We have the results." The words that followed destroyed his world. Aggressive. Advanced. Options limited. Time short. He sent another message. "Please come. It's important." 20 minutes later, she replied. "Stuck in crucial meeting. Can't get away. Keep me posted." That night, as Billy finally slept, sedated after hours of pain and tears, Christopher made his decision. He opened his laptop and began to execute the plan he'd been crafting for months. First, the financial preparations. He'd already documented every transaction, every lie, every betrayal. Now he began moving assets carefully and legally into accounts she couldn't access. The house was in both their names, but his inheritance from his grandfather, the money she thought they'd spent on renovations, sat untouched in a private account. Next, the evidence. He organized everything chronologically: credit card statements, hotel receipts, screenshots of messages, photos she thought were deleted. He created multiple copies, stored in various secure locations. Then he started composing emails to her boss, her family, their friends, each message carefully crafted, each recipient chosen for maximum impact. The emails sat in his drafts folder, waiting for the right moment, like missiles in their silos. The hospital became his second home. Billy's condition deteriorated rapidly, each day bringing new challenges, new pain. Christopher took leave from work, spending every moment by his son's bedside. She visited occasionally, making appearances between her meetings. Each time Billy's face would light up, then fall as she rushed away again, always with the same excuses. "Why isn't Mommy here more?" Billy asked one night, his small body racked with fever. "She has to work, buddy," Christopher replied, the familiar lie tasting like poison. "But she loves you very much. Can you call her, please?" Christopher did, knowing she wouldn't answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail. She never kept it on during her meetings. He documented these moments too. Every missed call, every weak excuse, every time Billy cried for her. The evidence mounted, a testament to her betrayal not just of him, but of their dying son. In Billy's final week, Christopher sent urgent messages daily. His condition is worse. The doctors are concerned. He keeps asking for you. Please come. She made brief appearances, always distracted, always rushing away to another emergency meeting. Christopher watched her check her phone constantly, knowing who she was messaging. He saw her relief each time she left, escaping back to her parallel life, while their son slipped away. The night Billy died, she was in a hotel with him. Christopher sat alone, holding his son's hand as the monitors flatlined, and the doctors rushed in. He sent one final message. He's gone. Her response came an hour later. OMG. On my way. But she never came. Instead, she sent another message the next morning about an emergency business trip to Brookfield. The same trip he knew would actually take her to Clearwater with her lover. The funeral arrangements fell to him alone. He chose Billy's favorite dinosaur book and toy to accompany him. He selected the cemetery plot under the oak tree because Billy had loved watching squirrels play in their backyard. He wrote the obituary with shaking hands, leaving her name out entirely. His first act of revenge. Now, as he prepared for the funeral, Christopher finished his preparations. The emails were ready, the financial transfers were in place, the evidence was organized. Everything waited for his command, like arrows notched on a bowstring. She thought she was escaping to paradise with her lover. She had no idea she was about to lose everything else. Christopher looked at Billy's last photo, smiling, holding the firefly, forever 5 years old, and felt the last trace of mercy die in his heart. The time for silence was over. The time for revenge had begun. The morning after Billy's funeral, Christopher sat in his home office, surrounded by 3 monitors. Each screen displayed a different aspect of his wife's life, the life she thought she'd kept hidden. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he reviewed his plan one final time. His phone buzzed with a message from her, landing in Brookfield soon. How are you holding up? Christopher's laugh held no humor. He opened his tracking software and watched the little dot that represented her phone moving across the Pacific, heading straight for Clearwater, not Brookfield. Time to begin, he muttered, opening his email drafts folder. The first email went to her boss, Daniel Carter. Christopher had crafted it carefully over the past months, attaching selected screenshots of text messages and hotel receipts. Mr. Carter, I believe you should be aware of how company resources and time are being utilized by one of your employees. He attached documentation of every business meeting that had actually been rendezvous with her lover, including expense reports she'd submitted for reimbursement, hotel bars, restaurants, all of it. His phone rang. His brother, James. How are you holding up? James asked. I'm working on something, Christopher replied, his voice steady. Remember that conversation we had about business ethics last month? The hypothetical about employee fraud. Yeah, why? James paused. Wait, are you saying she's in Clearwater right now? Told everyone she's at a conference in Brookfield. Jesus, that's awful. James's voice hardened. What do you need? Your legal expertise. And your discretion. You got both. Send me what you have. Christopher forwarded a set of documents to James's law office email. How long will it take you to review these? Give me an hour. Don't do anything until we talk. While waiting for James's call, Christopher prepared the next phase. He had created a separate email account months ago, untraceable to him. From it, he composed messages to her closest friends, family members, and professional contacts. His phone rang again. Everything you've documented is admissible, James said without preamble. The expense report fraud alone could end her career. The rest, he whistled low. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Since I found out before Billy got sick, yes. A long pause. Good. Make her pay. Christopher's other phone, a burner, lit up with a text from a number he'd tracked to her lover. Meeting confirmed for next week. Same place. He smiled coldly. The lover didn't know he'd been getting copies of their messages for months. Time to put that information to use. James, I need one more favor. Christopher said. "Remember that private investigator you used in the Rodriguez case? Already sent you his number. He's expecting your call." Christopher hung up and dialed the PI's number. Ethan Carter speaking. "Mr. Carter, my brother James referred me. I need documentation of certain activities in Clearwater this week. Location." Christopher rattled off the hotel name and room number he'd found in her forwarded confirmation email. Timeline. "They'll be there 5 days. I need photos. Lots of them. Discretion assured. Absolutely necessary. Consider it done." Christopher returned to his computer and began the financial phase of his plan. He'd spent months preparing, moving assets gradually to avoid suspicion. Now it was time for the final transfers. His office phone rang. Her company's HR department. "Mr. Brown, this is Patricia from HR. We received some concerning information." "I'm aware." Christopher cut in smoothly. "I've documented everything thoroughly. Would you like me to send it directly to you, or should it go through legal first?" A sharp intake of breath. "Legal first, please. And Mr. Brown, I'm so sorry about your son." "Thank you." His voice remained perfectly controlled. "You'll have everything within the hour." He hung up and checked his email. James had sent back the legal documents, annotated with suggestions. The PI had sent confirmation of his arrival in Clearwater. Her boss had responded with a single line. "Meeting in my office. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Christopher allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 was proceeding exactly as planned. He opened his banking app and began the final transfers. By the time she realized what was happening, their joint accounts would be empty, the assets secured in accounts she couldn't touch. His phone buzzed with another message from her. "Why isn't my credit card working?" Then another. "Christopher, the hotel says our joint account is empty. What's going on?" And another. "My boss is calling. Something about an emergency. Are you doing this?" Christopher didn't respond. Instead, he sent another batch of photos to her lover's wife. Yes, he discovered that particular detail months ago. The man wasn't just having an affair with Christopher's wife. He was cheating on his own spouse, too. James looked up from his laptop. Her company's legal department just opened a formal investigation, and the audit team's preliminary report. "It's bad, Christopher. Really bad." "Good." Christopher checked his watch. Time for phase 3. Hit her with everything. Christopher opened his email and began forwarding the hospital photos. Documents of every missed visit, every ignored call, every time she chose her lover over their dying son. He sent them to everyone. Her friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, everyone who had attended Billy's funeral, everyone who had sent condolences, everyone who needed to know exactly why she hadn't been there. His phone lit up with her face, her first direct call. "What have you done?" she whispered. "I've told the truth," he replied calmly. "Something you should try sometime." "Christopher, please. How's Clearwater?" "Better than Brookfield." A sharp intake of breath. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I've understood for months. Every lie, every betrayal, every time you chose him over Billy." "That's not fair." "Fair." His voice turned to ice. "Was it fair when our son cried for you in the hospital while you were in a hotel with your lover? Was it fair when you missed his funeral for a Clearwater vacation? I can explain. Save it for HR and your lover's wife. Oh, and your parents. They're especially interested in those photos of you at breakfast this morning, the ones taken at the same time they were laying flowers on their grandson's grave." "You're destroying my life," she whispered. "No," Christopher corrected her. "You destroyed it yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows exactly who you are." He hung up and turned to James. "How long until their company suspends her?" James checked his phone. "Just came through. Suspended without pay, pending investigation." "Perfect." Christopher opened his laptop. "Now, about those assets." As evening approached, Christopher received another update from the PI in Clearwater. The photo showed his wife arguing with her lover by the hotel pool, their faces twisted with anger. "Trouble in paradise?" James asked, looking over his shoulder. "Right on schedule," Christopher replied. "Once the money runs out, watch how quickly he abandons her." His phone buzzed with a message from the lover's wife. "Thank you for telling me the truth. I've frozen our accounts and contacted my lawyer." Christopher forwarded this message to his wife's lover, watching the chaos unfold from 3,000 miles away. Within minutes, his PI sent new photos. The lover storming out of the hotel room, wheeling his suitcase behind him. The calls had slowed to a trickle, but each one brought news of another relationship destroyed, another connection severed. Her closest friend, Amanda, called again, fury in her voice. "I just found out she was with him the night I watched Billy so she could work late." Amanda spat. "I kept her secret for months without knowing it. I helped her betray you and Billy." "Don't blame yourself," Christopher said. "She fooled a lot of people." "Not anymore. I sent those photos to everyone in our mother's group. No one will speak to her again." His wife's number flashed on his phone again. He let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker. "Christopher, please." Her voice cracked. He left. "The hotel wants payment. My cards aren't working. I can't even buy a plane ticket home. My boss won't answer my calls. My parents," a sob. "What am I supposed to do?" "Figure it out," he muttered, deleting the message. James looked up from his laptop. "Her company's investigation is moving fast. They found evidence of fraud going back months. Falsified expense reports, unauthorized charges, company resources used to facilitate the affair. Send it to her industry contacts," Christopher directed. "Make sure everyone knows why she was fired." "Already done. No one will hire her after this." Christopher's phone lit up with another call. Her father. "I've removed her from my will," the older man said without preamble. "No daughter of mine would abandon her dying child for an affair." "I understand. Do you need anything?" "Money for Billy's expenses." "No, but thank you." More messages poured in from her social circle, each one severing another connection. The mothers from Billy's school, her college friends, her professional network, all responding to the evidence with disgust and anger. His burner phone buzzed, a message from her lover. "This is your fault. You've ruined everything." Christopher smiled coldly and forwarded the message to the man's wife, along with photos of him abandoning his mistress at the hotel. Let him try to explain that during the divorce. Another voicemail from his wife. "Everyone's turned against me. My boss, my friends, my own parents. How could you do this? We could have handled this privately." Christopher deleted it without responding. Instead, he sent another batch of evidence to her remaining contacts. Anyone who might still be willing to help her. Every bridge would burn. Every door would close. James's phone buzzed. "Her company's making it official. Termination for cause, effective immediately. They're filing criminal charges for the expense fraud." "Perfect timing," Christopher said, opening his email. "Ready for the final blow." James nodded grimly. Christopher began forwarding the last set of photos. The ones from Billy's final days. His small body in the hospital bed, the empty chair where she should have been, the nurse's logs documenting every time she didn't show up. Each image accompanied by proof of where she'd actually been. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, timestamps matching her texts with her lover. "Think anyone will stand by her after seeing these?" James asked quietly. "Would you?" His phone lit up one last time. Her number again. This time he answered. "What do you want?" "I have nothing left," she whispered. "No money, no job, no friends. Even my parents won't speak to me. Please. You had everything," he cut in coldly. "A husband who loved you, a beautiful son who adored you, a good job, friends, family. But you threw it all away for cheap hotel rooms and lies." "I'll do anything." "There's nothing left to do. Your lover's gone. Your job's gone. Every friend you had knows what you did to Billy. Every family member has seen how you chose a cheap affair over your dying son. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she sobbed. The affair, it just happened. I never thought. You never thought you'd get caught, Christopher interrupted. You never thought I'd find out about the hotels, the lies, the fraud. You never thought I'd discover you were with him while our son died alone. Please, she whispered. I can change. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix. While you were building your new life with him, I was planning my future without you. Christopher's voice remained steady, emotionless. Enjoy your nothingness. He ended the call and turned to James. It's done. James nodded grimly. The PI says she's alone at the hotel bar. Her lover's on a flight back to his wife. Her company's attorneys have contacted me about pressing charges for the fraud. Good. Christopher opened his laptop one final time. Now for the last piece. He drafted a simple email to her family, friends, and colleagues. To anyone still wondering about the truth. Attached were the final photos. The first set showed his wife with her lover during Billy's last days in the hospital. The second set showed her at a luxury resort in Clearwater yesterday, while they buried their son. He added a simple message. Before you welcome her into your life, remember how she treated her dying son. Remember what she chose instead of attending his funeral. Remember that some people never change. They just find new victims. The photos tell the truth. What you do with it is up to you. Send. That's it, James asked quietly. Christopher nodded, closing his laptop. That's it. She made her choice that day in Clearwater. Now she can live with it. She had chosen her path the day she lied about Brookfield, the day she abandoned Billy in the hospital, the day she missed his funeral. She could live with the consequences. A week after Billy's funeral, Christopher's phone lit up with a message from the airport security guard he befriended. She's back. Looking rough. Christopher checked the time. 3:47 a.m. perfect. He'd made sure she couldn't afford a better flight. His brother James called minutes later. Airport security just spotted her. Want me to have someone follow? No need, Christopher replied, sitting in his darkened home office. She'll figure out soon enough there's nowhere left to go. The PI's final report from Clearwater painted a satisfying picture. Her lover abandoning her at the hotel, her desperate attempts to use frozen credit cards, the humiliation of begging the hotel manager not to call the police over the unpaid bill. In the end, her parents had sent a one-way ticket home, economy class with 3 layovers. Christopher's phone buzzed again. Amanda, his wife's former best friend. She just tried to call me. Amanda's voice dripped with disgust. I blocked her number. How many others did she try? Everyone. No one's answering. Her sister told me their parents changed the locks and left for their cabin. They don't want to see her. Christopher smiled coldly. Any word from her company? The audit team finished their investigation. Criminal charges are being filed next week, and her professional license is already suspended. The sound of a car door slamming outside caught his attention. Christopher moved to the window, watching a taxi pull away from their house, their former house. He had moved out days ago, leaving only what the divorce papers specified. His phone lit up with her number. He let it ring. Her voice trembled in the voicemail. Christopher, I'm outside our house. My key doesn't work. Please, I have nowhere else to go. He deleted the message and dialed James. She's here. Right on schedule, James replied. Want me to call the police? Not yet. Let her understand exactly what she's lost first. More pounding on the door, more calls, more desperate voicemails. Please, Christopher, everything's gone. My job, my friends, my family. I can't even access my own bank accounts. What am I supposed to do? Delete. The hotel bills maxed out my credit cards. He left me there. Christopher just walked out. Please, I need help. Delete. Our son's toys are in there, his clothes, his pictures. You can't keep me from his things. I'm his mother. That one made Christopher's hand clench around the phone. He pulled up the photos from Billy's last hospital stay and forwarded them to her with a single line of text. A mother would have been there. The pounding stopped. He watched through the window as she slumped against the front door, illuminated by the motion sensor light, her designer clothes wrinkled and stained from days of travel. His phone buzzed, a collect call from the county jail. He declined it. Later that week, James brought more news. She tried to contact her old clients. Someone leaked those photos of her in Clearwater during Billy's funeral. Her professional network is destroying itself to get away from her. Perfect, Christopher said. The next morning, Christopher drove to the cemetery. Billy's grave was covered in fresh flowers from everyone except his mother. "It's done, buddy," Christopher said softly, placing a small dinosaur next to the headstone. "She'll never hurt anyone like she hurt you again." His phone buzzed. A text from her. "At least let me get my things." He replied with a photo of the moving company's receipt showing her clothes and personal items had been placed in storage, along with the storage facility's address and the bill for 6 months. It was the only reply she would get from him. Around dawn, police lights flashed at the end of the street. Christopher had arranged that, too, an anonymous call about a suspicious person prowling around a private residence. He watched through the window as 2 officers approached her, watched her desperate attempts to explain, watched them check her ID and run it through their system. His phone buzzed one final time that morning. "James, her arrest warrant just hit the system," his brother said. "The fraud charges are official." Christopher watched the officers help her into the back of their car, not roughly, but with the firm inevitability of justice long delayed. "Good," he replied. "Let her explain to a judge why she thought company funds should pay for hotel rooms with her lover while our son died alone." The police car pulled away, carrying her toward the consequences of her choices. Christopher closed the blinds and turned to his laptop, where Billy's smiling face lit up the screen. "Phase 1 of justice for you, buddy," he whispered. "But we're not done yet." The county courthouse loomed gray and imposing in the morning light. Christopher straightened his tie as he walked up the steps, James at his side. "You sure you want to be here for this?" James asked. "I want to see her face when they read the charges." Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Her former colleagues, friends, and family members, drawn by the spectacle of her fall. Christopher took a seat in the back, watching as she was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her designer clothes and perfect makeup replaced by bare feet and hollow eyes. Her court-appointed lawyer looked overwhelmed. No surprise, Christopher had made sure every private attorney in town had a conflict of interest. "All rise." The proceedings moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Fraudulent expense reports, misuse of company funds, falsified documents. Each charge another nail in the coffin of her former life. When they read the amount, over $50,000 spent on hotels and meals with her lover, an audible gasp went through the courtroom. "How does the defendant plead?" Her voice cracked. "Guilty." Christopher watched without expression as she accepted a plea deal. 6 months in county jail, full restitution, 5 years probation. Her professional license would be permanently revoked. Outside the courtroom, her father approached Christopher. "We've removed her from the will," the older man said quietly. "Everything goes to Billy's Memorial Foundation now." "He'd appreciate that." "We're moving away," her mother added, appearing at her husband's side. "Sold the house. We can't stay here after what she did." Christopher nodded. More collateral damage from her choices. His phone buzzed. "Amanda. Just saw the news," she said when he answered. 6 months seems light. "The jail time doesn't matter," Christopher replied. "She's lost everything else. No career, no friends, no family, no future." Good. Back at his new apartment, Christopher opened his laptop to check the latest developments. Her lover's divorce was proceeding rapidly. His wife had hired the city's most aggressive attorney. His law firm had asked for his resignation. His own family had publicly disowned him. James arrived with dinner and updates. Her apartment application was rejected, he reported, setting down Chinese takeout containers. All 3 of them. No one will rent to her once she's out. Her old position filled, and HR sent warnings to every company in the industry. She's unhireable. Christopher nodded, picking at his food. Any word from her friends? Amanda organized something called a warning network. Every time she tries to connect with someone new, they get anonymous photos from Billy's last days. No one will touch her. The next morning, Christopher drove to his favorite spot, a peaceful overlook where he and Billy used to watch the sunset. The autumn wind carried the scent of approaching winter. His phone lit up with messages he didn't bother reading. Please, I need help. No one will hire me. I'm sleeping in my car. Just tell me what you want me to do. Each one a reminder of choices made and prices paid. James's weekly update arrived. She tried opening a new account at a local bank. They saw the fraud conviction and turned her away. She's completely cut off. Good. Christopher watched the sun sink toward the horizon. Any word from her family? They've disappeared. Changed numbers, moved away, left no forwarding address. She's tried reaching out through mutual friends, but no one will help her. Christopher nodded, pulling up the last photo he had of Billy, smiling despite the hospital tubes, his stuffed dinosaur clutched tight. I did it, buddy, he whispered. She'll never hurt anyone like she hurt you again. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Billy had loved sunsets, always insisting they stayed until the last light faded. Christopher's phone buzzed one final time. Amanda, just wanted you to know, she said quietly. The foundation helped 3 families this month. 3 children who won't be alone because of what you built from this. Billy would have liked that. Yes, Amanda agreed. He would have. Christopher ended the call and stood at the overlook, watching darkness claim the sky. Behind him lay the wreckage of his old life, a faithless wife reduced to nothing, a lover destroyed by his own betrayal, a network of friends and family who would never trust her again. Before him stretched a new path, illuminated by Billy's memory. Not happiness, perhaps, but purpose. Not forgiveness, but justice. His phone remained silent now. There was nothing left to say. She had chosen her path that day in Clearwater, and now she would walk it alone, just as Billy had walked his final days without her. Christopher turned away from the overlook and walked to his car. The foundation had work to do, children to help, families to support, so Billy's legacy would be one of love and presence, not betrayal and absence. Somewhere out there, his wife, no, his ex-wife, would spend the rest of her life understanding exactly what she had thrown away. It was finished, and it was enough. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.